Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have a great show for everyone today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. We watched the third Republican debate so that you don't have to. We pulled all the highlights, if you want to call them that. We'll break it all down for you, what it means, if it means anything at all. Also, there are some polls coming out of how various viewers felt about the debate and who they thought, quote unquote, won. So we'll get into all of that. We also, of course, have our eye continuing to watch closely the situation unfolding in Gaza. We've got some new comments, both from Tony Blinken, laying out some U.S., you might call them red lines, but our view, the Biden administration's view of what the post-war situation should look like. Some new comments from John Kirby that are also very revealing and sort of shifting the goalposts in terms of initially Biden had said no Israeli occupation of Gaza. Well, they're changing their tune a little bit there. So we'll talk about that. We also have some incredible clips of Republican cope post-Tuesday night's election results, which were by and large very good for Democrats and very bad for Republicans. We'll give you those, and we'll also tell you a little bit of what Saagar and I think of all of that. Also, Hillary Clinton popped up to make her case for Joe Biden, why she still thinks that he is the best candidate in spite of very low polling. And we have an interesting clip we wanted to break down for you between Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson, centering around free speech with regard to the, Israel's war on Gaza. So we will get into all of that. And also a little teaser for later today. We've got Vivek Ramaswamy joining us after the main show, so we'll be posting that as soon as we've got that ready for you as well.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much to our premium subscribers. You enable it. We will have Vivek. You guys will get it as soon as we can. We'll post it separately, both as a video and as a podcast. So stay tuned for that. It'll be fun. We'll get his initial reaction to the big scum moment that everybody is talking about. But let me not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead and start with this quote-unquote highlights of the debate. So we picked some of the best moments, or at least some of the more illustrative moments, because I know many of you didn't want to stay up past your bedtime and watch it. I don't blame you. I certainly don't feel better or wiser for having done so. But
I feel much worse, actually, for having done so.
One credit to the moderators is that they asked some of the more important questions at the top. And actually, the very first one was to Governor Ron DeSantis of, why should I support you and not Trump? What is your pitch to Trump voters? Here's what he had to say.
Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall. He should explain why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing. In Florida, I showed how it's done. 1 year ago here, we want a historic victory, including a massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we have to do it.
So, Krystal, I'm calling this the effective and the electable case. I think it is the best case. I also don't think there's any evidence that people care. Unfortunately for him, I wish politics worked this way. You have a guy who flipped a purple state to a red state. You have a guy who actually, quote unquote, did what he said he would do. That's part of the pitch, is that the other guy didn't do. So you're supposed to put our records, but this is actual politics. And most people are not voting on that, in fact, at all. If anything, they're rejecting you simply because the other guy, who you're critiquing, I think correctly in so many different ways, is just saying, like, what is he calling him? Ron DeSanctimonious. And that's enough. So that's what loyalty, that's what cult of personality, and so much of this looks like. And that's part of why, in much of our analysis, we're like, can you really win a debate where everybody is losing by 50 points? I don't know.
Yeah, hard to say. Kyle and I were having this debate last night, too, because he was very like, I think DeSantis had the best night. And I was like,
yeah, sure.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, sure, if you want to say that. But what does that really mean in the grand scheme of things? But, on this Trump point, in particular, I agree with you. I think it's the best possible case that he can make. I don't know that it's so much that Republican voters don't care about electability. I think some of them definitely do. But, they're looking at the same polls we're looking at of Trump beating Biden in 5 out of 6 swing states, even according to the New York Times. And they're saying, hey, we're not that worried. Looks pretty good for our guy right now. So there's that. There's the fact that, the attacks that have been made against Trump from this entire group of contenders have been few and far between. They've been a little lackluster. Yes. And when they have packed more punch, like recently you had Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie, both trying to make the case to a Republican audience that, like, listen, things may look okay for Trump now, but you look at the polls, if he is actually not just indicted, but found guilty, and things look a lot different. And they didn't want to hear that at all. So the case that would actually make sense in terms of why Trump is a problem from an electability perspective, no one in the Republican Party, very few people in the Republican Party actually want to hear that case made. Now, maybe if you'd laid the groundwork for it from the beginning and you've been prosecuting the case relentlessly, or your attack dogs have been prosecuting the case relentlessly, maybe then they might, start to get a little nervous about what this all might look like. But you can't this late in the game come in and try to make that case and expect it to land on anything but deaf ears. So I think that's the problem. The other thing, Saagar, that made this debate so weird to me, this was really one of the only mentions of Trump. I mean, he came up a few times.
Right.
But he's the elephant hanging over all of this. And the fact that there were no questions about him, the candidates weren't really bringing him up, it added to the sort of surreal nature of this, of like, what are we even really doing? What is this debate even really about? This sort of like existential question hanging over this third Republican debate, which I have to imagine, once we get the ratings, are going to be very low.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question about that. And it's one of those where I understand where they're coming from, because this is the impulse that I would want to have. I'd be like, man, we're going to get them on the issues. We're going to get them on the contract. And you can do that. But it's also basically negligent to not acknowledge and spend a ton of time on the contender, the former president of the United States, leading in every poll. And now your whole case against him is, like you said, electability. He's beaten Biden in 5 out of 6 polls. Right. Why should anybody vote for you? I like the guy. He makes me laugh. He delivered on what I wanted, which is driving liberals crazy, and he might win. So, this is an irrelevant sideshow. To that point, though, there was one big moment, and actually to the extent that there was substance at all, kind of came during some of the contrasts on Israel, on Ukraine, and on TikTok. And so there was one particular moment where Vivek Ramaswamy, who will be joining us later today on the show, called out Nikki Haley, calling her Dick Cheney with 3-inch heels, although there is some speculation that he may have included Ron DeSantis in that moment as well. Here's what he had to say.
You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multimillionaire. So I think that that's wrong when Republicans do it or Democrats do it. That's the choice we face. Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
In which case, we've got 2 of them on stage tonight.
We got 2 of them
on stage
tonight. I don't think it's fair to call Ron Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels. The heels is fine. It's just you can't be calling Dick Cheney. Cheney is a pejorative we should reserve only for the biggest scum. Note that what I'm saying there. The thing is that what that eventually led to, the Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels comment, which I thought was hilarious, is when Haley was given the chance to respond, she immediately calls for war with Iran, and then is bolstered by her South Carolina colleague to also call for war with Iran. I am not exaggerating. We have the clips of the two in their response. Here's what they had to say.
I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
We've got 2 of you on stage.
The second thing that I will say is I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition. What we need to be doing for Iraq and Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off. But what we don't need is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal.
You have to strike in Iran. If you want to make a difference, you cannot just continue to have strikes in Syria on warehouses. You actually have to cut off the head of the snake, and the head of the snake is Iran and not simply their proxies. In order for us to have a powerful response from America, we have to be in a position of strength. As President of the United States, my foreign policy is simple. You cannot negotiate with evil. You have to destroy it.
So as you can see there, Krystal, she said, first of all, I don't understand this heels thing. You're going to have to explain that one to me.
I can't.
First of all, why is it a pride a point of pride to be able to run in heels? Is that like a thing? Second of all, the ammunition, I've been thinking about it. I went to sleep thinking about it. I probably had a dream. It was one of those things in my ambient memory being like, what does this mean? And so much they tweeted it out. Nobody can decipher it. So you're the heels expert here. You got to explain it to me.
I think she should challenge Ron DeSantis to a race in their 5-inch heels.
Okay,
The whole thing to me was perplexing. The not to go too deep into this, but she also, like, she had time to come up with a response.
Yeah, I'm like,
it's
what does
not
this
like
mean?
it was like immediately in the moment. And then I don't know why it's a point of pride that they're 5-inch instead of 3-inch, number one. Number two, I don't know why the running thing, I don't know. And then on their ammunition, they're not a fashion statement, their ammunition. I guess she was trying to go for like,
deadly
they're
heels?
a weapon.
Yeah.
They're dead. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
Let's leave it.
It was bizarre. But on the war part, the more substantive piece here, the number of wars that were advocated for last night was deeply disturbing. And
amazing,
I'm not the only one. Ann Coulter, who is making an appearance later in the show as well, who I don't normally favorably cite, but listen, when she's right, she's right. She said, so far, 3 of the 5 Republicans want to start wars against China, Russia, Syria, and Iran. These people are lunatics, and I could not possibly agree more with that. And that's before we even get to the war that they, also some of them want to start with Mexico as well. So, this has been the drumbeat since the beginning of, the Hamas massacre in Israel and then the Israeli response. There has been this real war drum beating of we actively want to start hostilities with Iran. And that has been the critique of the Biden administration, is basically like, they're not going after Iran hard enough. They're not doing enough effectively to start World War III. And it's just completely insane. And I'm sure it lands with some segment of the Republican base. But even if you're pulling the Republican base on like, hey, how do you feel about a broader war in the Middle East and our sons and daughters being sent over to fight and die? They're like, hell no. So it's just amazing to me, Saagar. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but there was an idea that the neocons had kind of been checked after the failures in Iraq and the failures in Afghanistan, and Trump coming on the scene and winning on this, pretending like he was always opposed to the Iraq war thing and really rebuking the Bushes over the direction of the war on terror. They never went away. They never changed their views. They are still just as itching for war in all kinds of corners of the planet as they have always been. And it has never been more apparent than it is right now in this moment.
No, they're bloodthirsty psychopaths. Like, let's be super real about it. They have never seen a war they didn't want to get us into. It's a religious doctrine to them. And I really realize that, because I'm like, look, these people are politicians. At the end of the day, they're supposed to care about getting elected. But can you read a poll? The vast majority of Republicans at this point are against Ukraine aid. Vivek Ramaswamy, the only guy on the entire stage who's against aid to Ukraine. And the way Chris Christie and them talk about it, they're getting choked up over Ukraine and Kyiv. And I'm like, wow, look, I know it's a trope and it's often trotted out, like caring more about other countries' borders than our own. In this case, it's actually real. They really do. Like, it's a religious doctrine in terms of the fate of Ukraine. It's like they think that Donetsk and Luhansk, they're like, this might as well be the border of Oklahoma or something like that. It's incredible to me. And that they believe it because there's nothing politically advantageous to do so in terms of the polls. Now, in terms of the donor money and where all that stuff comes from, that's a whole other story.
They care a lot more about that oftentimes than they do what the people actually want.
And that's what it really showed to me. Is I couldn't help but come through and look, you clip it if you want. Thankful for Trump. I was like, you know what? Listen, the man has a lot of problems, but if that's the alternative to whatever the hell this mess is with this going on, like these people, it is shocking to me. Somebody even put it out and they're like, that was a great Republican debate performance from 2004. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So it's basically the exact same line. Dick Cheney and 3-inch heels is not really unfair. Those are all positions that he advocates for today and advocated for at the time. And it's how have we not learned from his own personal failure here?
I don't see Trump as being much different, even rhetorically at this point, with regards to, hawkishness on Iran and Ukraine now is like at a stalemate, and even the Biden administration is trying to come to some sort of deal. I don't really see him as being significant.
Well, he was against that. He didn't start start a war with Iran? Sure. He bombed Soleimani. He didn't actually.
He almost started a war with Iran.
Okay, but he didn't.
He was, I mean, he pulled us out of the Iran nuclear. He was very hawkish towards Iran. I don't think you can deny that.
I am not going to deny it. I think rhetorically he was mixed. He had
bombing Syria,
all the people who were under him were awful.
Escalated the drone war.
Hey, listen, he tried to get out of Syria. The people who were there wouldn't let him. Now, is it on him that he was too dumb to get lied to by General Mattis? Yeah, I agree with you. He didn't get us out of Afghanistan. He wanted to get us out of Afghanistan. I will take at least somebody who's incompetent and has a restraint, or has at least like some instinct of restraint, than somebody who is both probably incompetent but also completely unrestrained in their rhetoric. And I'm talking, of course, within the Republican Party. That's only the realm of which we can have the discussion. At the very least, I would say this: it's definitely better than whatever was this mess going on with Nikki Haley.
With regard to the specific flashpoint right now, which is this potential broader war in the Middle East, I see zero evidence that Trump would be better than any of the people that were on the stage, who were all like jockeying to be the most bloodthirsty and the most pro-Israel out of all of them. And, you know, Trump gave Netanyahu everything he wanted while he was in office. So again, I don't really see that he would be any different on foreign policy. And I think he would be, Ryan said on Twitter, I think this is probably right, like the difference between Democrats and Republicans on Israel right now is basically like Democrats will like hand-wring about the genocide and Republicans will just be like, yay, let's go for it. So it's not like it's that much of a difference. But yeah, I don't see Trump as being superior to any of the folks on stage, really, when it comes to foreign policy.
If it's Israel, well, I really don't think this is fair. First, because he was against the Ukraine consensus really from day one. Now, that said, like, look,
no,
I'm not going to defend. No,
Remember he was saying that we should have.
First, he said that we should send Chinese planes in order to start a war with Russia and China.
Correct.
But then, second, eventually did come. I think a month or two out, he came out against in terms of sending weapons to Ukraine. So listen, I'm going to say, I think he's an inconsistent. I don't think he particularly cares. I think he was a bad president, and I don't think he was a good commander-in-chief because he didn't actually know what was going on underneath. Instinctually was against this. So for me, like on this stage, that's enough.
His whole thing was after, he still continues to this day to both critique Biden as not being like hawkish enough on Ukraine, but then also like not supporting the military aid. He's just going wherever he thinks the politics of the moment are.
That's fine. Listen, for now, especially where the politics are right now, I'm fine with that. But anyway, we'll save this debate. I'm sure we'll have it a lot whenever we have two different nominees. Let's go to the next part here in terms of the debate around campus anti-Semitism, how to respond, and censorship. So there was an interesting, and actually I want to get into this a little bit with Vivek whenever he joins the show. Vivek calling out Ron DeSantis for banning the Students for Palestine organization on the University of Florida campuses, and then eventually leading to a big ideological schism over whether you should have free speech and free expression or shutting down these student groups. Here is what DeSantis had to say when he was challenged.
Joe Biden should have the Department of Justice on these college campuses and holding the universities accountable for civil rights violations. When you should not have money going to these places. I already acted in Florida. We had a group, Students for Justice of Palestine. They said they are common cause with Hamas. They said, we're not just in solidarity, this is what we are. We deactivated them. We're not going to use state tax dollars to fund jihad. No way. And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control.
Right. So I was very intrigued by this exchange in terms of calling out for the DOJ. And actually, DeSantis used language which made my blood curl. He said, these students don't feel safe on campus. And I was like, brother, we have now spent a decade, successfully, in my opinion, you can tell me, fighting against the language of safetyism and convincing the majority of the Republican Party that nobody is owed a right to, quote unquote, emotional safety whenever it comes to issues. Now, physical safety is a different story, and I think everybody can agree with that. But in terms of these safe spaces, I mean, how much have we spent correctly mocking the idea of like emotional safetyism, about safe spaces, about safe zones, about free speech and hate speech, and how there's supposed to be a difference. It's not a difference, just to be very clear about that in terms of what it looks like in First Amendment law. And then on a dime, He completely flips around and changes. So if anything, that just shows me what DeSantis is really all about, especially given how can you talk such a big game about campuses and all that. He just brought Ben Sasse, I believe, as the chancellor of the University of Florida system, again, with we're going to be all about free speech and all that. And listen, cool, but as long as these organizations aren't hurting anybody, well, it's a free country. Like, I don't understand why we can't just allow it to be. Look, the dumbasses sign on to a letter. All right. I mean, okay, look, their names are public. If you want to go out against them, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to, you can. But if these people want to continue to do so, there's nothing particularly wrong with that. You could say it's abhorrent or morally objectionable or whatever, but he's outright wanting to ban these places on campus. So clearly they've learned nothing, and I think he has been exposed completely as full of it on this issue, which Vivek correctly, I think, called him out for.
Vivek was the only person on the stage who had a divergent view on this issue. Everybody else, I mean, basically the whole Republican Party, with very few exceptions, has gone all in. They sound like the woke college kids who were like roundly mocked for their language about microaggressions and safetyism and the need for safe spaces, et cetera. And then, the minute it serves their political cause of the moment, they're all in on the exact same language. And I'm not surprised, because it has always been the case that even when they were at their peak of like talking about this cancel culture and PC culture and all of this stuff and, people being snowflakes, et cetera, they never would call out when people were getting canceled for a divergent view on Israel-Palestine. They were always silent on this stuff. So I always knew it was very one-sided, and it was more about controlling speech and having their speech be uncensored than it was a truly principled take in favor of free speech on campus or anywhere else. And so again, I'm not surprised, but it's also just, it is really something to see how quickly they flip on a dime and how much they just immediately adopt all the language of like the silliest parts of left liberalism in service of their own political goals. So yeah, it's wild to see it all laid out there. And I just don't, it really is hard for me to wrap my head around how they don't see the blatant hypocrisy in it and don't at least try to message around it or use some different language or draw some different boundaries, some way of distinguishing themselves. But no, I mean, once again, absolutely nothing has been learned.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the reason why you get away with it is very simple, is that the right-wing industrial complex is not built to be consistent. I mean, listen, neither is the Democratic media organization, so it's not particularly unique. But when you live in an ideological bubble, it's just all about going with the team. There's no, in terms of like external enforcement, being like, hey, you're being hypocritical, I bet it does not even pass his mind, because it's within the donor bubble and it's within the Daily Wire ecosystem. You've got like Ben Shapiro like probably cheering this on from the sideline. So if that's the ecosystem that you're swimming in, like, why do you need to be consistent? Like, you pay no price for being inconsistent, right? And that's part of the problem with the race to the bottom around all of this. And, you know, I guess that's a lot of reason why we try and do what we do here. It's a good way of actually staying in check. So anyways, guys, that's the highlights, the lowlights, or whatever, if you will. As we said, we've got that clip with Vivek Ramaswamy. We're going to be talking to him after the show wraps, and we'll be posting that ASAP.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.